Despite their 1903 success, it would still take the Wright brothers 2 more years and several prototype airplanes to completely solve the challenge of flight. They had been paid absolutely nothing for their efforts. Seeking to obtain a patent for their airplane design, they became more and more secretive about their work, trying to hide from other airplane designers what they had learned. Finally, the Wright brothers decided that they would not fly anymore until they had their patent protection. In 1905, they dismantled their airplane and stored it in a wooden hangar, not to fly again. A second bicycle manufacturer named Glenn Curtiss was making his own progress. In January 1907, Curtiss became the fastest man on Earth when he rode the world's first V8 motorcycle to a speed of 136 miles per hour on Ormond Beach, Florida. Later that year, Curtiss joined Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, the wealthy inventor of the telephone, in establishing the Aerial Experiment Association to build several experimental aircraft. Curtiss completed his own personal design, named the June Bug, in 1908. In the midst of all this development, Scientific American magazine offered a trophy for the first public flight in America. The Wright brothers were contacted, offering them the chance to make the first flight, but they declined. Glenn Curtiss, however, was more than happy to take up the offer, and on July 4th, 1908, he made the first official public flight in the United States, flying his June Bug. The stage was now set for the great competition between the Wright brothers and Glenn Curtiss for selling airplanes. Unfortunately, it was also accompanied with detrimental lawsuits, and on the positive side, traveling exhibition teams, as both people tried to sell their airplanes. The Wright brothers got their patent, and in 1909, they sold their first flyer to the U.S. Army, which is why in 2009, the U.S. Army celebrated their own 100th anniversary of flight. Glenn Curtiss, on the other hand, had an almost mystical belief in the future of naval aviation, and in fact, in 1910, trying to get business from the U.S. Navy, he offered free flight training for a single naval officer. The United States Navy could no longer ignore the airplane. Soon after, Captain Washington Chambers was assigned aeronautical responsibility for all aviation matters. For his Herculean efforts, to this day he is known as the father of naval aviation. Navy admirals saw the possible value of airplanes, but only as eyes of the fleet in scouting, observation, and gunfire support. There was no way they could anticipate any threats to their powerful battleships from these fragile aircraft. Captain Chambers desired a proof-of-concept flight experiment to demonstrate shipboard use of an airplane. He contacted the Wright brothers, but they declined, stating that it was too dangerous to attempt a landing takeoff aboard ship. Curtiss, ever the risk-taker, however, accepted. Curtiss selects one of his civilian exhibition pilots, Eugene Ely, to conduct the experiments. Ely received Aero Club of America's pilot license number 17 on October 5, 1910. A month later, he will make the first takeoff in history from a ship in November 1910. Regretfully, within a year, he will be killed in an airplane crash in Macon, Georgia in October 1911. On November 13, 1910, Ely launched from the USS Birmingham from a ship moored off of Norfolk and flew safely ashore. Less than 2 weeks later, Ely is in Mobile, Alabama to provide a series of exhibition flights for the Great Southern Aviation Meet. The local newspaper noted that he had arrived fresh from the glory of having made a flight from a cruiser's deck, and that he would soon attempt to land aboard a warship off the coast of California. Soon afterwards, in December 1910, Lieutenant Theodore Spuds Ellison, who will eventually be designated Naval Aviator No. 1, is ordered to report to Glenn Curtiss at North Island, San Diego. he is the first naval officer to be ordered to flight training. A little more than 2 months later, Eli landed aboard the USS Pennsylvania, moored in San Francisco Bay. Secretary of the Navy, George von Elmeyer, was still not convinced. He said, "When you show me that it is feasible for an airplane to alight on the water alongside a battleship and be hoisted aboard without any false deck to receive it, I shall believe the airship of practical benefit to the Navy." There was a slight problem with this challenge. Curtis's and Eli's successors were made with land planes. No one had ever flown a seaplane. Curtis now had to turn his attention to the challenge of taking off from water. His first attempt to create a seaplane had actually occurred in 1908 in New York, when he had outfitted his good old Junebug with 2 crude floats and renamed it the Loon. Unfortunately, it refused to lift off the water, most likely because the craft was too heavy and the entire concept was discarded. Revisiting the concept, Curtis's second attempt occurred in 1911 in San Diego, when he equipped a standard Curtiss pusher with a single flat-bottom pontoon. After many failed attempts, it also refused to rise from the water, regardless of the amount of power applied or wing surface provided. Curtiss noted that the aircraft stuck to the water surface much like the sensation of a fly trying to take off from flypaper, all due to the vacuum-like suction flow underneath the pontoon. On January 26, 1911, he experimented with a new design, converting the pusher biplane into a tractor biplane. He also added a new scow-shaped pontoon with an upward curve in front and a downward curve behind. It worked. It was Curtis's nearly 70th attempt to rise from the water before he was successful. Although this airplane took off perfectly well if there was any breeze to break up the surface of the water, on a still day, it still would not break free from a glassy sea. His simple solution was to introduce a vortex-generating step at the rearward portion of a pontoon to reduce or eliminate water adhesion and allow the craft to rise from either rough or glassy smooth water. It worked perfectly, and it has been used on nearly all seaplane configurations since. 2 seagoing models of Curtiss aircraft were eventually made available. Hydro airplanes is an airplane that rests on pontoons or floats. A flying boat rests entirely on the water. Both types of airplanes would be brought to Pensacola. The Robert J. Collier Trophy is awarded annually for the greatest achievement in aeronautics or astronautics in America. Glenn Curtiss won it twice. In 1911, he won it for development of the hydro airplane, and in 1912, he won it for development of the flying boat. On February 17, 1911, Curtiss met the Secretary of the Navy's challenge. He launched from the waters off of North Island near San Diego and alighted aside of the USS Pennsylvania offshore. He had his hydro airplane hoisted carefully aboard, ate a delicious lunch with the captain, had his airplane relowered, and then flew back to San Diego. The United States Navy was now convinced. They were ready to buy their first aircraft.